Hello, everyone out there in the multiverse. I'm Dan.
And I'm Drea, and we own Multiverse Comics in Culpeper, Virginia. And today, you guys are going to go on a journey of discovery with me, because here's what happened. Even though I have been reading comics for a while, and even though we own a comic book store, it didn't really occur to me how limited my view of comics was. If you look behind us, this is the indie wall, and it stretches a couple feet on either side of me. And so we recently switched our Marvel and DC and put it on the side of the shop and put our indie here. So I was looking more at the indie comic books than I had before, and I realized that there are way more genres represented than just superheroes. When I think of comics, I think of superheroes, and I think that's a problem that a lot of people have when they think of comics. Like, they want to read about superheroes, they're going to come to the comic book store. If they want to read literally any other genre, they go elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I was looking at the indie comics, and my eye happened upon Undiscovered Country. Now, this is number 6, but I read the first issue, and so one could argue that this is either dystopian or post-apocalyptic, depending on how you...
It's a fine line.
It is a very fine line between those genres. Normally, my theory is post-apocalyptic is right after the big bad event. In both cases, a big bad event happens. Right after that, when society is completely crumbled, is post-apocalyptic, Mad Max.
The world building, and then the dystopian is where the world was rebuilt in a bad way,
right.
Or at least bad to some people.
Yeah, so some government is in charge in dystopia. In post-apocalyptic, no one's in charge. It's complete anarchy. But anyway, so one would argue that this is closer to post-apocalyptic than dystopian. But either way, I read it, and I was entranced and intrigued, and I started talking to Dan about how I think few people really do realize how far beyond the genre of superheroes that comics actually goes. And those of you watching, I'm sure that you probably know that as well, but I wanted to give you some talking points to talk to your friends and neighbors and family about how far beyond the superhero genre comics can go. So I started thinking about all the genres that I like to read, my kind of go-to genres. Some of them aren't necessarily represented in comics. For instance, you're not going to find a whole lot of bubblegum pink rom-coms. Maybe a couple, but if I have to read another Betty and Veronica comic, I'm going to just strangle someone. But...
What about Betty and Veronica meet Vampirella and Red Sun?
Dear God, no. No. Not that there's anything wrong with them, they're just not to my taste.
What about Harley and Ivy meet Betty and Veronica?
Stop.
We got that on the shelf.
Stop.
Oh, what? No, I think someone bought it.
Stop.
Oh, well, yeah.
So I started thinking about all the different genres that I really like to go to, and so I brought some of my books to the shop, and then we picked out singles and trades that go along with those, and we're going to talk about... If you like this genre, then you might like this comic. Now, this is not your typical, if you like this book, read this one, because some of them do not correlate directly. They're in the same genre, but that doesn't mean that they're anything alike. For example, my first one here, put that to the side for me, please, love. Night Circus by Aaron Morgenstern. Love this book. If you like magical realism at all, you should get this book. This is sort of the quintessential magical realism book. And then I just finished The Starless Sea, which is also by Aaron Morgenstern. It is amazing. So an obvious choice kind of in that realm is Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman is also very well known for his magical realism books. And of course, he got his start in comics, didn't he?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe it was probably Sandman.
Yeah. Neil, if I'm wrong, I'm so sorry, but I think Sandman was your first. And if I'm wrong, I apologize. I swear I'm a fan.
We apologize greatly.
But anyway, so Norse Mythology, Gaiman is doing this right now. And look at that cover, how pretty. And then another magical realism comic, which is nothing like The Night Circus because it is super dark and gritty, but still magical realism, is the Department of Truth. So, hon, what is the Department of Truth?
Basically, the Department of Truth is a government organization that wants to prevent conspiracy theories from getting widespread. The reason because if enough people believe them, they become reality. The first issue, which you're holding up there, deals with flat earthers. And, and basically, one of the great things about this, the director of the agency is Lee Harvey Oswald. It hasn't actually dealt. I mean, the first issue kind of it starts back then.
Right.
Lee Harvey Oswald's being interviewed about what happened back then with Kennedy and stuff, but it's not dealt with how he's actually the department head yet. But that's great because they're dealing with that conspiracy. The most recent issue dealt with a presidential conspiracy about how every president going back since before Kennedy was chosen from birth to be the president.
Wow.
And Kennedy was an experiment that basically they wanted to get rid of, apparently. These are spoilers.
Terminated.
I'm sorry, but it's a great read.
Wow. What?
And it's done. It's not done as satire. It is done completely serious, which is it's what makes it great. The type of art style is very gritty. It's something I usually don't like, the type of art style.
Yeah.
But it fits the series so well, it can't have any other kind of art style.
So the premise is that if enough people believe in something, it becomes true.
Yes.
So I can't help thinking of that Supernatural episode where that little boy believed all the things he was told.
Mm-hmm.
And so they started coming true in that town.
Well, yeah, this is not
and again,
an
you have to
original.
take it seriously.
The things that you believe coming real is not an original concept, but the fact that they made a government organization to prevent that is very unique and original, and it's beautiful how they do it.
Yeah, I see what you mean about the artwork, but wow, I mean, yeah, I don't know that I would read this either. I mean, without you telling me what it's about, but yeah, look at that. That's fantastic.
It's like I said, it's not my style, but I love that series.
Okay.
It's something that I will read every issue. You know.
So magical realism,
Yeah.
absolutely represented.
Yes.
Another one, and I don't have a book series as a genre of representation, but one that I just finished was, oh gosh, I'm gonna hang on. Etiquette and Espionage. That's what it was. Etiquette and Espionage, which was steampunk, supernatural, romance, Victorian, all of it. So
all genres in one.
No, but the steampunk genre is one of my favorites. Leviathan by Scott Westerfield is another amazing one. Probably my favorite to date is Leviathan by Scott Westerfield. And so steampunk representation is Mechanica, and this also
Lady
has
Mechanica.
Lady Mechanica. I know what I'm talking about. Lady Mechanica, and in addition to this, besides being steampunk, is she's also connected to the underworld, I guess you would say it, because it's not like she's not strictly a hunter. So I'm not going to compare her to Anita Blake, which we'll get to in a second. It's more than that. So Lady Mechanica, definitely got your steampunk genre going on there.
Mm-hmm.
And of course with steampunk, that any story, any type of character can be in steampunk. They just have to be existing in this Victorian era with all the steam and the goggles and the revolvers and such.
Mm-hmm.
Another one of my favorite absolute go-to genres is fairy tale retellings. This is one of my favorites. This is actually a gift from you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We have this tradition on Christmas Eve. We give each other books, and so this was one of those. As Old as Time, Beauty and the Beast retelling. I will read them all. And so some fairy tale retellings that are represented by comics. You have Grimm's Fairy Tales. That's a pretty obvious one.
And this is from Zenoscope.
Mm-hmm.
And they specialize in kind of that retelling of fairy tales. They do occasionally things that aren't fairy tale related, but most of it's like...
Yeah, Zenoscope kind of focuses on that. We've got a couple more behind us. Then you have... speaking of Beauty and the Beast...
Belle, Beast Hunter.
Again, these are not alike, but they're in the same genre. So this is taking the fairy tale and really empowering it, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, exactly.
Same concept with Gretel, where you have...
Yeah, where she hunts down witches.
Yeah, so, and then you have that element. So, fairy tale retellings, there's some representations of that. This is actually a recent genre love that I've kind of dealt with, and that is dark academia. And so one representation of that genre is A Discovery of Witches. Another really iconic dark academia would be The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Also, more recently, more YA would be A Study in Charlotte, which is the great descendant of Sherlock Holmes. But dark academia deals with being in a school setting, usually New England, and it's more about the students being very dark and sinister, and plots and manipulations and things like that. And so you have this idea of dark academia, the hallowed halls of the Ivy League and prep schools, and all the horrible humanity that happens in there. So, An Unkindness of Ravens is another one that I picked up off the shelves recently and loved, and it is very much right up that alley of A Discovery of Witches. Like, these two are actually very similar, as well as being representations of the genre. And then one that I have not read, but Dan insists does actually fit the genre, is Strange Academy. Now, you might know Doctor Strange from the movies, and we tried really hard not to incorporate any superheroes in this, because that was kind of the whole point, is what are comics beyond superheroes?
Yeah, but this exists within the superhero world of Marvel, but it's dealing with the students, and they are not heroes. They're just learning about their powers. It's not like X-Men, where they still are superheroes and everything like that. They are just trying to deal with these powers, like not being heroes, basically. So that's
the
why
opposite
I say
of what Professor X does.
Yeah, kind of. Like, he's just the intention of Professor X, but not what actually happens.
The intention of later Professor X, I will say.
Yeah.
First guy was just like, nope, fodder.
Yeah.
Anyway, I shouldn't say the first guy as if they're different characters, but like the character evolved over time.
Mm-hmm.
But the very first iteration of Professor X was, wow, jerk. On that same note of retellings and fantasy, I went to more like classic stories. So this is Frankenstein. You have more of your classic horror type stories, and those are still alive and well in comics.
Mm-hmm.
You have some very, very specific and very source material honoring comics, but you also have some twist to the tales, if you will. A lot of gender bending too, which I appreciate. And this one even deals with steampunk. So there's a lot of genres represented here, but specifically you've got Van Helsing, which of course that's more connected with Dracula, but I didn't have my Dracula copy, so Frankenstein, Dracula, all of those.
Yeah, and in the comics she does deal with other monsters too.
Yeah, so.
And I believe there is a trade of her against Frankenstein, so it fits. Yes.
Doctor or the monster?
Pretty sure it's the monster.
So Frankenstein's monster.
Except Frankenstein was the dad, so therefore the monster would take his name too. Checkmate.
Now you see us both on the hills that we will die on. So, Van Helsing, steampunk, gender bent, monster.
Yeah, Van Helsing's actually the daughter, but that is Jekyll there with her, which I think is actually a gender bent. Like, I don't think she's just the daughter of Jekyll.
You think she's actually Jekyll?
Yeah.
I know I read it and I cannot remember.
The story doesn't make it clear. Doesn't 100% make it clear. So I'm not, and I haven't read early issues. I've read the most recent stuff.
To be fair, I read the first 6 issues right at the beginning of the pandemic, so a little fuzzy. All right, moving on. Another absolute favorite of mine is sci-fi, and he and I were having this discussion. Like, so many of these, you can say, well, it's also fantasy. Well, it's this, but it's also fantasy. Well, it's this, but it's also sci-fi. But it's also fantasy. Like, sci-fi and fantasy, is this very broad genre, and you have all these subcategories and subgenres, and I get that. So we were a little bit hard put to find something that is strictly science fiction that's not, the way I put it, it's not franchised science fiction. So franchised science fiction would be like Star Wars, which I'll get to in a second, or Firefly, which we have over there, things like that, Star Trek. But when you hear sci-fi, you definitely absolutely think of Isaac Asimov as being sort of one of the great fathers of science fiction, if not the, well, I won't say he's the absolute father, because, let's face it, that would be, depending on your point of view, either Jules Verne or H.G. Wells.
Jules Verne was first, right?
I would say H.G. Wells. So, I mean,
No, what I'm saying is,
as far as timeline?
Timeline.
It depends on how you look at it. Submarines existed. So,
yeah.
Time machines
but
didn't.
rocket ships did not.
fair.
Yeah, exactly.
So, again, maybe fodder for another video.
Yeah, I would say Jules Verne is first.
And I would say H.G. Wells.
Okay.
Again, 2 more hills that we're going to die on.
All right, let's go. All right. Now this is a story. You don't in the first issue you don't necessarily know what's going on. There will be spoilers here, but it's a kid, and at the end of the story, he basically it's a kid and the person that's raising him.
Okay.
So those are the only 2 people there. What'd you say?
His mother?
No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anyways, you have those 2. Those are the only 2 people. They're the only 2 people on Earth.
Okay.
At all. At the end, you find out that the boy, who's probably about around a teenager at this point, finds out that he is a clone of the man who ended all life on Earth. Right?
Boo.
Yeah. And he cloned himself as a way to be able to bring back life. We haven't gotten to it's on issue 2 right now. It's 6-issue miniseries. Hasn't actually detailed everything yet. It's really good. The art's really good. You would, by looking at it, you would not think it's sci-fi because greenery. You usually don't see that much greenery in sci-fi stuff.
Yeah.
And the person who raised him is this AI that he invented to be able to take care of himself when he comes back from the dead, basically. It's very good. I highly recommend it.
And so sci-fi is another genre that, again, very all-encompassing. We were a little hard-pressed to find one that was purely just sci-fi.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mentioned Star Wars already. Of course, you've got all the movies came first. You've also got the cartoons. You've got other iterations. And, of course, you've got all the novelizations, some of which are worth reading, some of which are not.
Yeah.
I'm looking at you, Princess Leia. Anyway, so of course you have the novelizations of Star Wars as well, and some are worth reading and some are not. But you also have Star Wars comics. So you have the well, can you tell me the difference? Because we have this one, and then we have this one, and then we have Star Wars Bounty Hunter. What's the difference among these 3?
Well, okay. This is Darth Vader, so it's a comic about Darth Vader. Yeah. This is just straight up Star Wars, so this is basically more of the ensemble thing that you would kind of get from the movies kind of thing.
Okay.
And this is Bounty Hunters, which is, about the bounty hunters that would exist in Star Wars.
Like Mandalorian type.
Yeah, it's something like Mandalorian or, Boba Fett that's coming up or, something like that.
Now, on that same idea, you also have books that exist, and they have movies based on them and TV shows based on them, and then they have comics based on them. And we're going to be doing a video that's very specifically, here's the show and here's the comic, and sometimes the comic came first and sometimes the show came first. But you also have the books that came first. The source material is actually the novel, and then it has comics to go with it, and sometimes they'll have movies and TV shows. 2 that we were thinking of. So first of all, it's Stephen King's The Dark Tower series, and then you have the Dark Tower graphic novel series. Now, was this single issue comics as well, or just graphic novels?
Yeah, they were done as miniseries, as single issue, 5 issues, I believe it was. That is the first in the series that are, I don't know if they finished or if they're continuing on, but they go through a lot of the Dark Tower series.
And the artwork is amazing.
The artwork's great. It's actually adapted by Peter David, which is one of my
He's a really good one.
Favorite writers, comic writers, anyways.
And then you also have the Game of Thrones series has its own comic book. So while you're mourning the end of the show and still waiting the end of the actual series, you can read the comic.
Yeah.
Now, this is a genre that I wanted to mention. This is my honorable mention genre because this is more something that I teach, which is coming-of-age stories. We talked a little bit about that in one of our summer videos about, school readings that correlate with comics. But right now, my sons are reading Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Dan is actually reading this to them, this whole series to them. And if you really think about it, the heart of this is coming of age. You know, this is a kid struggling through middle school. Mm-hmm. And so we have a couple things that correlate with that genre. First of all, you have the Zombie Kid Diaries.
Yes, which is written very similar to Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
It's the same. So yeah, the format is very similar. Mm-hmm. Now, have you read this one?
I actually have not read it.
Yeah, this is still
but
fairly new.
I am very interested in it.
Yeah,
we have like the first 3 in. I don't know if it goes beyond that or not. But
this is similar to I read this book a few years ago called Zombie Haiku, and it was all about this guy in a mall during a zombie apocalypse, and the entire thing is written in haiku, which is kind of funny. I definitely appreciate when people take zombie apocalypse things and kind of turn them around a little bit, make them a little funny. Not that there's anything funny about a zombie apocalypse. Be prepared. But we can make fun of it till it happens. Yeah. Then other coming-of-age style things. You have Lumberjanes, which is basically very much more the female, the feminine side. You've got your girl power, your group of girls conquering the world, one middle-age crisis middle school age crisis at a time. And then I'll also go ahead and give honorable mention to My Little Pony. Say what you will, I'm actually quite impressed by this iteration of My Little Pony. This one is really kind of fun. Like, I don't know if you can see. This is My Little Pony the musical, and there's a little sign here that says, "Warning, there is singing in this comic." It doesn't take itself too seriously, but it does a good job of dealing with very realistic issues without being very heavy-handed and soap operic, which is nice. Mm-hmm. Last one I'll mention, this, again, would go kind of under the fairy tale genre. Or
supernatural.
The fantasy, not fairy tale, sorry. Fantasy genre, more into the supernatural subgenre.
Monster hunters.
Monster hunters, but not just strictly monster hunters, because one thing that's interesting about the Anita Blake series is you have this idea of politics being involved with rather than all the monsters being hidden, they're legalized all of a sudden, and of course that's all the implications and all the things that means for Anita Blake and her ilk. And so this is Guilty Pleasures, the Anita Blake series, and we have the graphic novel, which
they've done a series of those. They haven't done all the books of those, I know, but that is the first book in graphic novel form.
Yep, and so you're dealing
with...
I
think the first half, because it's 2 volumes, yes.
Yeah, I think it's only half Guilty Pleasures. And then some comic books that we, I think are similar to that. Once in Future, we cannot recommend this one enough. I'm serious.
I've recommended it to everyone I talk to.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It's a new series, and I think we're gonna... We should make this into a drinking game. Anytime we mention Once in Future, take a shot. Kidding, don't do that. You'll die. Because we talk about it a lot. But there's also, you have Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yes.
Again, it's not just a strict, Van Helsing, there's a monster, I kill it thing. There's more involved. It's much more complex than that. And then these 2 I have not read, so I'm going to let you talk about them. First of all, I Walk with Monsters.
I Walk with Monsters, it's a girl that and her brother, her sibling, they're foster kids, actually. It hasn't been completely dealt with what exactly happened. It looked like one of their foster parents was selling the kids. But they're definitely going at, like, the girl has some kind of control over some kind of monster.
Okay.
Like I said, it's very early in the series and hasn't dealt with a lot of the answers to a lot of stuff, but it is written very well.
A little gritty, it looks like, but it does look interesting. Just
yeah.
from the couple pages I just glanced at, same ideas of this very gray area of this is where the monsters exist, but it's not. They're not all good, not all bad.
Yeah.
And one thing I love about this genre in particular is this idea of the humans are the monsters, and the monsters are very humane.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
So, and so I'm assuming that kind of deals with that as well.
Yeah.
And Shadow Service.
Yes. Shadow Service stars this girl who has magic powers. She's kind of a PI. And she comes across a British agency that some people have dubbed MI666, who deal in the supernatural. They have various agents and stuff, and basically they're kind of wanting her to go undercover to get her client. And the client's a really bad guy, and she realizes he's a really bad guy, but she also, it's her client, so she has a loyalty to her stuff. So she's not completely one of the agents necessarily, and
so is she a morally gray
character? Kinda. I mean, she's definitely a good guy, but it's also, she's definitely resentful to this agency that's trying to take over her life.
Not for kids.
And it's it's definitely a little bit mature with some of the violence that's in it.
But no worse than Anita Blake. I'd say it's probably on par.
Exactly. It's probably on par with Anita Blake. She's definitely the rebel type character where she doesn't want to be told what to do, even though this agency is, technically the good guys. They're trying to save people and stuff, and she doesn't want to be told what to do.
So it's Buffy and Giles.
Yeah. And the thing is, the head of the agency's like this little kid. It hasn't explained completely what his deal is yet, but he's a little kid.
He's an ancient one, duh.
Probably. He probably is ancient, but he's a little. He looks like a little kid.
All right, fair enough.
He looks like Artemis Fowl. That's basically.
Cool. All right, so I hope that we have been able to give you some ideas of where you can look if you're looking to read in a particular genre and you don't want to read yet another superhero comic book, because I swear they're all Superman, Batman, and Wolverine. Anyway, and don't get me wrong, I love those characters dearly, but sometimes you need a break from from the superhero genre, and we got a whole wall of the break from the superhero genre, but we also have a couple walls of superheroes if you want to read those as well. So. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Happy reading, and we will see you in the multiverse. So, I got a collection of some of my favorite genres represented by my own books, and we picked out some trades and single issues. Let me start that over. Dear God, you threw me off.
Sorry for talking and participating in the conversation.
No, I know. It's perfect. I love you. You're wonderful.
I am wonderful.